I'm not I'm not a human rights lawyer, but I used to be one when I was the director of the Human Rights Documentation Center under the Namibian Ministry of Justice many moons ago. I'm not a commercial lawyer, but I used to be one when I held the chair of the World Trade Organization and started to specialize on the intersection between climate change, trade, and development. And I'm tasked to talk about environmental challenges. I'm not an environmental lawyer, but I have written one of the first books on environmental law in Namibia, which is now out in 4th edition. Now you ask, why does he say he's not an environmental lawyer if he wrote a book on environmental law? Because this book is not about environmental law, in fact. With the support of the Hans Seidel Foundation, this book covers environmental challenges from different angles. From human rights angles, from a commercial angle, from a trade law angle, looking at the different sectors, water, land, air, looking at the local and the global, the people in the communities, the people in SADC, the people in the AFCFTA, the African Free Trade Area, and the people in the world. And this book I would like to recommend to you in the context of this important conference, because there is also a chapter on mining and energy law in Namibia, providing those who are here with all the relevant information. Detlof van Oertzen, a well-known expert from Namibia, is the author of that chapter. But there are other chapters that are perhaps equally important for the topic that we're discussing here today. And I've come here to talk a little bit about sustainable development, because I consider myself to be a sustainable development lawyer nowadays. And I'm doing that not only from a Southern African perspective, I'm doing this from a global perspective. I have an institute in Stellenbosch called DROP, like the drop in the ocean. It stands for Development and Rule of Law Program. And we look into legal opportunities to promote development, especially on the African continent. And since I also work globally, I thought to accept an appointment in the global north, where I'm also heading an institute for climate law. And I think those two opportunities coincide nicely with what we are discussing here today. Because the topic, and in the morning, to me it simmered through a little bit like as if we are pro gas and oil, or whether we are pro protecting the environment. And in the time that we live today is a time of complexity. It is no longer true that you are either or. It's a messy situation. Developing countries need to develop. Of course, they have a right to development, within the confinements of what we can afford on a global level. What good is it to develop in isolation where the rest of the world is gradually coming to an end. In that regard, I think it is important to acknowledge the opportunity space of oil and gas for Namibia. My recommendation, not as a lawyer, also look at the mistakes that have been made elsewhere. We had representatives here from South Africa, from Nigeria, talking to us. We can learn from mistakes that others do. We don't have to do them all the time ourselves, too. The lights go on and off in South Africa. That's a problem, but that can be remedied. And I think it is important that regional cooperation displays as a great opportunity of these developments in Namibia. And so much has been said by the previous speakers, despite the fact that the Director of Problems has only given me 15 minutes. I can cut my discussion short. I wanted to talk for 2.5 hours. I'm a law professor. I think that's part of my duty. But I will cut it short in a sense that I will refer you again to the Constitution of Namibia as one of the highest pieces of law where all other laws have to coincide with. No matter which way forward with oil and gas production in Namibia, the Constitution supersedes all other interests. Article 1.6 of the Constitution, it is the law above all laws. Therefore, all legislation, existing and future, must be consistent with the provisions of this Constitution. This Constitution is a product of a free Namibia. Cherish it. The Constitution also contains key environmental clauses and also refers to sustainability. Article 100 of the Constitution vests all natural resources in the state unless otherwise legally owned. Digest this article well in all operations. Article 95(1) stipulates that the state shall actively promote and maintain the welfare of the people by adopting policies including the maintenance of ecosystems, essential ecological processes, biological diversity of Namibia, and utilization of living natural resources on a sustainable basis for the benefit of all Namibians. Local content, that's the reference, all Namibians. Through Article 95 of the Constitution, which is a principle of state policy. What does that mean? Principle of state policy means that all governmental action in all spheres is guided by this principle. And it cannot be neglected in any legislative process, in any licensing process. In that sense, Namibia has already embarked on a progressive pathway of environmental protection. Founding Father Sam Nujoma was personally present in 1992 in the Rio conference to show the world Namibia's commitment in terms of environmental protection. This commitment is reflected in Namibia's constitution and subsidiary legislation like the Environmental Management Act, the Petroleum Act, the Petroleum Laws Amendment Act, the Petroleum Taxation Act, in the Model Petroleum Agreement, and more. I'm not going into the details. But I'm going to leave you with a message here are some of the most important pieces of legislation, all referred to in the book, that you, by the way, can either freely download from the internet, or you can get a free copy from Dr. Clemens von Doderer from the Hans Seidel Foundation.
Round of applause.
I would like to leave you, and this is the book, Environmental Law and Policy in Namibia. It's, by the way, it deals with Namibia, but it is utilized in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, in Tanzania. It is replicated in several other parts of the world by now. And this is the link where you can find it. It's in its 4th edition. The first edition came out, I think, 2010. And I think that's in itself an achievement of sustainability. I would like to leave you with this, coming to a more serious angle, because the Honorable Minister also mentioned it in his officiation this morning. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, is the world's leading authority on climate science. And I can testify that because I served as a member of this for many years. The IPCC produces comprehensive assessments and gives policymakers around the world guidance on how to craft their policies and how to craft their legislative decisions. And without pointing into one or the other direction, I would like to leave you with some of the key points the latest report from the IPCC concluded with, and that came out earlier this year, the 6th assessment report. In that report it says fossil fuels are responsible for the most of human-induced greenhouse gas emissions. Fossil fuel combustion accounted for 86% of carbon dioxide emissions from human activities between 2010 and 2019. Fossil fuel use must decline sharply to meet the 1.5 degrees centigrade goal. Namibia is a signatory to many international agreements and treaties, like the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It was a signatory to the Kyoto Protocol. It is a signatory to the 2015 Paris Agreement. And I would like to refer you briefly to Article 144 of the Namibian Constitution, where it says that international law obligations are ab initio, that is Latin for meaning right away, part and parcel of Namibian law. So Namibia has obligations towards these international instruments. And in order to fulfill these instruments, it is important that any processes are being brought in line with what the international community requires, not only because of the international community, but also because of the people at home. And that is a stretch. Someone said this morning, you have to have simple language or simple advice. It's not possible in this case. It's a complexity issue. We have climate change, that's a reality. Namibia has to develop, that's a reality. There's poverty, that's a reality. There's energy insecurity, that's a reality. There's corruption, that's a reality. And you want to bring all in line with your good intentions. And I do see that there are positive prospects around the corner. But in order to achieve those, I think it's very important that Namibia, together with big corporate partners, should become a game changer for green transition. Corporate obligations must be accompanied by regulatory standards that make compliance possible, where corporate responsibility will increase the ability of corporations to regulate and self-regulate. while conducting due diligence analysis before undertaking any major project and preventing or mitigating adverse climate change impacts linked to its operations. A new corporate culture, because there, as well as in other issues that I've mentioned, in the past it used to be you're either pro oil and gas or against. You're either part of the fossil fuel lobby or not. If you look at the policies and structures, and we have representatives from Shell and others here, of these companies, fossil fuels are only part of their contemporary portfolio. Why? Of course, they know that the international requirements will oblige the international community for the purpose of self-protection to move away from certain fossil-related activities. So they are wise, of course, to invest in new technologies, in new energies. And that's why I'm saying green energy will be the just transition for Namibia. Okay, fossil may be a stepping stone on the way. Utilize the income wisely in order to be able to become one of the world leaders in green energy afterwards, in order to become a leader in renewable energy resources. With that, I would like to thank you. Please consider environmental protection not an issue that is not commercial, not an issue that is not human rights related. It is in the interest of human survival that we protect the environment, both local and global. I thank you.